we'll just go ahead and get started. So because it's us three for now, and if anyone joins in, it might change in a little more different style, but we'll probably wrap up a little faster, and we can have some really good, more in-depth discussion, tackle some of those questions you might have. So this is developing a middle school esports team. My name is William Van, and I am the Director of Technology and the head esports coach at Christ Community Lutheran School in Kirkwood, Missouri. Here's my contact stuff. Email is always best. That's wvan@ccls-stlewis.org. You can always check out my YouTube channel. I'll also post this whole presentation on there as well. And then Twitter, I post a lot of makerspace stuff with my kids. And then, of course, we broadcast on Twitch for our gaming. So that's twitch.tv/CCLS_esports. And we're in an off season right now, so we're not doing anything until August, but it's always fun to check in, see what the kids are playing, see what we're doing. So just a little bit of what we're going to be covering is we're going to look at how to design a program if you're really looking at going for that kind of direction for your school, how to coach an esports team, because there's a few little different things you need to know, what the league experience is like, just some of my reflections, and then we'll have question time. But ask questions away at this point if we want to dig deeper into like a slide or a topic or anything like that. Just let me know. So let's design your program. So I use the design cycle process in my makerspace class like all the time. I love this process. And I think it works well when you're like developing these big projects for anything, for your school, church, even home projects. You want to start with a little bit of awareness, then go into inquiry, research, ideating and planning, prototyping, your test revision process, then launch and market. And what I love about this process is you're also bouncing in between every single one of those the entire time. So you're in research and you get new awareness, so then that makes you go and ask a new question, and the cycle keeps flowing through. So the first thing, just so we can grow our awareness together about esports industry. Last year, it was a $1 billion industry. In 2019, 2020, it was about a $500 million to $600 million industry. So it's just ballooned. And part of that is COVID, of course, everyone's at home. But just interest in general. Like the kids growing up who grew up playing Xbox and everything like that, they're now wanting to turn that more into a competitive field, and people are sponsoring it, which is awesome. Competitive tournament prize pools. This number blew me away. They range anywhere from $2.75 million to $60 million for a single competition you can play in. So there are competitions where you come in last place and you're still walking away with a $10,000 check in cash. And that's awesome. I should definitely start doing that on the weekends, see what we can break in. The other thing that I couldn't believe in 2021, Britt Ashman, he was the Fortnite World Champ. And he's a 15-year-old boy who won $3 million, and he gets a $10,000 sponsorship per month from Abercrombie just to post a photo on Instagram of wearing their shirt. That's crazy. So $3 million, $10K per month, and then if he wins again, that keeps spiraling and growing. So there is a lot of money out there, and it is a very viable field, especially if you're really good at playing video games. Esports scholarships right now, in my research on this, they range anywhere from $3,000 to like full ride scholarships. Wash U in St. Louis is currently offering full ride League of Legends scholarships. So Wash U, they're like an Ivy League college. Playing video games, you get to go and learn anything you want. That's incredible. And a shout out to Concordia St. Paul. Our Concordia systems are actually starting esports programs now. I found they're offering up to $9,000. And in my research, that was the highest one that was listed available. Seward, I want to say they're doing $2,000 or $3,000. And then Concordia, Texas is the same. They're in like that $5,000 range. And then just in your community alone, teenagers, about 90% of them when they were surveyed say they play video games on a console or a PC. And if we throw in mobile gaming, we're talking about like 99.999%. So there's already exposure to video gaming. They know the mechanics of most games, and we can grow on that. 8,600 schools last year created an esports team. So those are high schools. Those are and those are full competition league play. And then middle schools are trailing behind that because now they're turning into the feeder programs. And then of course, just there's local esports competitions in your area. In St. Louis right now, we're having this new industry pop up, which is kind of like the old internet cafes with all the gaming, well, it's gaming PCs for them, but all the PCs available. And then they're hosting competition play off of there, so kids can be winning like $500, $1,000, $10,000 if they take first place. And that's a cool way to create a good community. So some things, now that we've grown our awareness, we need to ask ourselves, is there interest, right? That's the big thing. Do you have anyone who'd be willing to show up in your school after school to play video games? So I recommend doing informal and formal surveys. When I was looking at developing my program, my first thing was just asking around, like, hey Connor, do you like playing video games? Would you be interested in playing this at school as a team? Would you like to do stuff like that? And then also sending out a formal survey. When I sent out the formal survey, I sent that out to the entire school and the parents because I wanted to see if there was interest. Just maybe there was a kid that I didn't necessarily think would be interested, but I could figure that out. And then also parent interest, because when it comes to esports, you do need coaches for it. You need parent supervision or an adult supervising, but you also need just in general support. When you're bringing 10 hungry 7th graders in after school, right, to play a video game and they're there for 2 hours after school, it's really nice if you have someone who's willing to provide like pizza, food, water. We had a parent provide jerseys for us, so they made t-shirts for us. And it's just a good way to get that parent involvement and community involvement there. And then also it helps you identify if you have any possible funding sources that you might not have thought of. We were very blessed. We had a person who had sold their house and they were looking to just give away some of the money as a donation at the end of the year. So we were able to contact them and they gave us a little bit of money to help continue funding our esports program. The other thing you can do with these surveys is figure out style. So by style, I mean, are you looking at doing a full competition league where you're competing against other groups, you're playing for money, playing for scholarships, playing for trophies, or are you looking for more of like an after-school sport or an after-school club? Is it going to be an in-school thing? So just kind of that style and figuring out what is your comfort level, the comfort level of the kids, what are they expecting out of it? Things that you should probably consider and ask yourself is what is appropriate for your school. So for instance, Fortnite is a shooter game that still has a lot of baggage with it. Some parents don't like the idea of their children playing a shooting game at home. They'll definitely not like the idea of a school-sponsored shooting game. So you have to keep that in mind. What is going to be acceptable and appropriate for your school? The other things you have to be aware of is some of the characters, and I believe it's Hearthstone, which is like a turn-based card game online, have some scantily clad figures in there. And is that going to be okay for, a young child to see? Is that something you want your school to be endorsing? So doing a little research and finding out the games is, I think, an important key step. As with anything, how much time are you willing to invest? This takes time from setting up, if you're doing competition leagues, getting your team registered, getting the students set up for it. If you're running an after-school club, making sure everything's updated, good to go. There's a time investment, and you have to ask how much time are you willing to give up from your already busy schedule for this? And then how long is this sustainable? This is a big question, because if you're doing a BYOD program, will you always have kids who have that device to bring it in? If you're doing a school-owned system or program, how much money do you have to maintain the costs of running those machines, doing upgrades, things like that? So once you do that, you're going to want to figure out your research. And the best way to start with research is checking out your local high schools, local middle schools, see if they have teams already formed. And they are great resources to start asking, what is the community like? Because your community for that is going to be fairly similar to what you have at your school. So if there was any interest there. And then, of course, local universities, because then we're thinking big picture. Are our kids going to feed into a university that has an esports program that has scholarship opportunities that way? Then once you've done that, you send out your formal surveys, utilize your data collected, jotting down those notes from who you talked to, what they said, and then just find out what platforms is going to work for your school. Is it an Xbox, gaming PC, Nintendo Switch? What games they're interested in playing? Just all of that stuff. And I say that because during your research process, this is when you kind of create that sheet that you can then hand to your administrator and be like, here's the interest, here's my back work to show you this is something that we can do, people want to do this, and this is why I think we should. And then of course, when you're creating that sheet, you need to create your cost expenses. So figuring out whether you're a BYOD or a school-owned program, whether if there's a cost to join a local league or a national league, how much it's going to cost to play those video games. Do you have to purchase those games? Are they free-to-play games? And then any other subscription costs that are needed that are like your Xbox Live account. You know, $9 or $10 a month for Xbox Live or $3 for a Nintendo Switch Live account. So next is ideating. Yep. Ideating and planning. This is the step where you've essentially gotten approval from your school administrator or the board, and they say, yeah, go for this. So now you need to create what you're going to do with this. And the first thing you should do is say, how many players do I want? Because this will determine a lot of your costs and how many coaches you need, how much time you're going to have to invest. Personally, I recommend 10 players per single coach. And I say that from experience because I had a team this year where I had more than those 10 players. And my Rocket League group had like 7 players in it. And my Knockout League group had 6 players in it. And I could not manage both of them at the same time, especially during practices. I'd be bouncing between, and then because one group was more receptive, I started gravitating to that side and working with them more and leaving the other ones behind. So 10 is about what you can handle, plus middle schoolers playing video games. I say this out of all love. They get very, very loud. Very loud, but and they get very excited. Next is your game system. If you're buying this, what are you going for? If you're purchasing it as a school, you know, is it going to be a gaming PC? Are you purchasing like 5 Xbox consoles? Or are you purchasing a couple Nintendo Switches? Where are you going to be storing those? Stuff like that. In general, middle school is best served by Nintendo Switch and Xbox, and then high schools are best served through either a gaming PC or that Xbox or PlayStation combination. And then, of course, location. That's key here. Because when you have a bunch of kids coming in for a tournament that they're playing and you're playing against another group that's, you know, somewhere across the country, but you're playing online, you need to know, if you're not playing on Switches, how are they going to be displaying their Xbox? So you need something that has either multiple screens in there, or you can bring in multiple screens. And then, of course, if you are doing a gaming PC lab, you're going to want to make sure you have adequate power and ventilation, because they get super hot. Like, playing video games on the gaming PCs generates a lot of extra heat, and it gets very toasty very fast. So let's take a look at that cost breakdown. In a BYOD program, some of the benefits of having students bring their own device is, of course, it's very low cost, and it's perfect for an initial startup, an initial program, just because they'll probably already have it, and you're bringing it in, and then the school's not responsible for managing those updates, making sure the devices work, stuff like that. Because that is a cost. It's your time that you're having to put into that. Some of the negatives, however, of a BYOD program, students might not have games, so you have to determine, do you put that financial burden on the parents to purchase them? Does the school purchase it? How do you weigh that? They might not have an online subscription. I ran into that issue with a few of my students where the parents would not let their children have an online subscription account, which we understood and we worked with, but we were able to talk to them about the school purchasing that, and then they had to manage at home if it was turned on or not. And then, of course, their devices malfunction, they break, they get lost, they get stolen, things happen to it. And that's potential negativity there. But the other one is it can be a barrier for some students. So if you're doing a strictly BYOD program and you don't have a Nintendo Switch to bring in, it might be that a kid who's interested and might be a really good player is not able to come in and play based off of that because you have this specific requirement. In a school-owned system, is great because you're getting stuff that's brand new out of the box. You know there's going to be at least a 2 to 3 year longevity out of that. You won't have to worry about broken parts for stuff like that. So you do have some of the assurances there. It is school managed, so you have control over the updates that go out. You have control of the game updates, stuff like that. And then there's no chance that a kid shows up to your competition and goes, "Hey, Mr. Van, I forgot to bring my Nintendo Switch today." And you're scrambling to figure out a solution for them, calling their parents, stuff like that. Now, some of the negative problems, it is a huge upfront cost. If you're going with gaming PCs, right, you're talking with a PC and then a screen and then the game cost, stuff like that. For 10, probably around 15 grand to get everything covered. And then that keeps adding on. If you're adding more stuff, keyboards, mice combinations, things like that. There is a continual cost for online services that you'll have to budget for your school, especially if you're doing something like through EA Play or Xbox Live. There is a cost to some games, which is a cost the school will need to then take on for themselves, and then space and storage. So if you don't have a lab already established, you're going to need to find a new room to put everything in. If you have Xbox consoles and you don't have an established play area, you need to find a locked cabinet, because devices like these have a tendency to grow little legs and walk on out of the building somehow. Haven't figured that out yet, but it happens. And then, of course, if you're setting this up, most likely you're going to be the one who's responsible for making sure everything's up to date and usable for everyone else. Some other costs to consider: league registration is about $25 per player per semester, or you can get a school-sponsored cost, or a one-time cost per semester. Cost of games is free to $60. So some of them are $20, sometimes they go on sale for $5, and then you're wondering, how do you manage that? And then, of course, accessories like replacement controllers, and again, those online services. So for my team this last semester, here's a breakdown of what happened. We had 15 students who were participating, and then this is what we needed. Couple students. We had one whose parents actually couldn't afford it, but they really wanted to play, so the school agreed to it. And then one where we made an agreement with the parent to purchase the online subscription, then they could terminate it after the 5 months needed. So that was $30. One of the games we played was Knockout City. Brand new game. It's free to download and play, but if you're trying to do competitions with it, trying to set up private matches, you have to spend the $20 for the full game. We had to purchase that for 5 students. Then our league registration was $475. And I had a Switch controller that fell off a shelf, and that was $70. So total, $675 to run this for a single semester off a BYOD program. And again, if you were doing this for like a school-owned one, the initial cost, that would be a couple extra zeros at the end of there. Just something to keep in mind. But again, I do think a school-owned system has more benefits than it does consequences. So when you're ready, if you're not really sure if you want to get into esports and creating a full-on team, definitely prototype it out. Meaning you're just doing a small group, maybe it's after school or like you're a lunch club, or even a summer camp is a great way to find and establish interest and also raise money and funds for your program throughout the year, is the summer camp. What I did was I created a non-graded elective. I got permission to do this from my principal, and it was able to limit students to focus on 2 games at the time I set this up. It created a mandatory practice time for my students where I wasn't having to compete with basketball at the time, which was huge, basketball and baseball for us. And then, of course, it created an excellent platform to launch into our league competitions because we had familiarity, we had already practiced on some of the games. So when we ran this the next year, I already had some team captains basically established. And then also use a single system when you're starting out. We ran into an issue where we had a few students bring in their Nintendo Switch, and then a kid brought in his Xbox, and then another one brought in his PlayStation, and then we were having issues with the games actually talking to each other. They weren't doing what they were supposed to, and that was a little bit of a headache for troubleshooting. But when you have a single system, and you have multiple of that single system, so multiple Nintendo Switches, one of them breaks, you kind of learn everything the first time around, so when it happens again on a different system, you're able to provide a faster repair or faster troubleshooting surface. And then, like I said, it saves on the stress of compatibility. So now you're ready to go. You want to launch and market, start selling your program to the student body. My school's like really into flyers to market for kids. So creating a few flyers to let them know what was going on. We set up some free play days where we just invited kids to stay after school one day and, play Super Smash Bros. With their friends after school. And we could see who did well. We could say, if you were really interested in this, you could come back and play for us. We branded a Twitch channel. So a lot of kids, especially if they're into gaming, like professional gaming, or want to be a professional gamer, also want to be a professional streamer. And you can use that to your advantage to get them more excited about what they're doing. So brand your own Twitch channel. So like we did CCLS Esports. And then of course we marketed it as we were competing on our socials to let just our community know that we were going forward with this. And then once you're done, once you go through the season like you do with anything at the end of a school year, you have that test and revise process. Feedback surveys. What did you like about competing this year? What didn't you like? What do you want to change? What do you think we could do better at? What could I do better at as a coach? What could you do better at as a player? So just kind of that discussion and reflection period. And then, of course, evaluating the feedback that you get and implementing new systems to meet that feedback if it was actually valuable for yourself. So what does coaching an esports team look like? Well, the great thing is you do not need to be an expert in esports, like you don't need to be an expert in video games at all. You should have a general knowledge of it though. Right? You want to be able to tell students like the button they need to press to jump if they're not doing it when they should. And have just a good idea of how the mechanics of the game work. What are you trying to accomplish with it? One of the best ways to do that is actually watching other competitive players on Twitch and YouTube. So you can start seeing what a professional is doing and evaluating their strategies and then how you could bring those strategies in for your team. And then real-time strategize. Just like with basketball or any sport, right? You, as a coach, you're watching the whole field. You get to see everything happening at once, but your players are kind of narrow-minded, right? They only see what's in front of them. So being able to do that real-time strategizing and shouting that out and letting them know what they could be doing differently. Coaching a video game is a little different with emotions, right? So you have a kid, going back to basketball because basketball's huge at CCLS. You have a kid in basketball and they're getting frustrated that they're not doing well. So what do? They run harder. They try better, like they're going after the ball more. In esports, it's totally different. You're stuck in a chair watching a screen. You have no way to get any of the emotions out through exercise or through movement. So as a coach, you're dealing with more high-strung emotions, whether it's joy, laughter, dejection, anger, frustration. Like it's going to be magnified essentially 10 times. And it's very easy. We had one kid on our team who was like this. He already struggles in school processing emotions, but in video games, what happened is you could visibly see him start huffing and getting upset, and he'd start trash talking. So he created a coded language, which was just 5 seconds, and the team players who were with him in the game knew that they had to protect that player for 5 seconds while he put down the controller, got up, took a deep breath, relaxed, recentered himself, sat down, and then was able to keep competing. Otherwise, what would happen is it would build up, and then you get, controllers thrown. And that's never a good thing. Or he was really big at like smashing the desk that he was at. Like you just hit it really hard. You want to avoid that. And the other thing with coaching too, which is interesting with this, is you are building those interpersonal relationships and skills and all of that team building stuff that goes with it. But a lot of the kids who get interested in esports are not the ones who necessarily have experience with team building, or the ones you might not necessarily have the strongest relationships with to begin with in the classroom. So this is a good way that you're matching them and meeting them there.
Gaming team
So we'll skip
coach.
this. It's just from a professional coach, and all he does is he talks about all the same stuff. You're just kind of like the eagle in the sky seeing everything, and you're managing their emotions and all that good stuff. But another big thing with coaching is your communication skills. Problem with esports is you cannot set up and replicate the exact same scenario every single time. Just because of the RNG in a game, stuff might not spawn where it normally does, or what does spawn is not what you're expecting it to. So you have to be able to quickly move in between that and create generic general scenarios for your kids to do. One of the things we had Knockout City. It's a dodgeball game that was created specifically for esports, and it creates these specialized dodgeballs. One of them was like a TNT bomb, another one was a cage, so you'd throw it and it would like capture a person in the cage, just all sorts of stuff. So when we noticed that we couldn't figure out what our opponents were doing, what we would do, or what I would do, is I would say resources, and then my players knew to go to the spawn locations, constantly rotating around those spawn locations, and control those sites to prevent the other team from going to them. It was a really good strategy for us. We had another one called Kamikaze. This is one the kids made up. So you take that cage ball, you would catch another player, and then usually we only use this when that player was getting surrounded by other opponents, and they would just jump off the side of the map, giving us a point to score. But we said kamikaze. The kids already knew what the play looked like, and they were able to jump in, just like you would with any other sport. Another big thing, designating that team captain and allowing them to make decisions, allowing them to make calls, calling out locations, maps, players, things like that. That's huge for you as a coach because you might not necessarily see something that they're seeing. And then, of course, you want to minimize excess noise. We tried the first game when we did this, having music in the background, and it was too much for the kids, the players. They just couldn't focus as well. They were getting distracted by stuff. So you're trying to control that excess noise, excess sound. And then, of course, yelling. Because once somebody starts yelling, that's going to get another person yelling even louder, and then it might create some tensions over here with another player. So you want to avoid that. Here are some coaching resources. This presentation is having problems uploading it, but I'll show that QR code. Again, you can also find it on my Twitter. I'll post it there. But just these 4 resources really helped me when I was setting up and looking at what does it look like to be an esports coach. And then the other thing that I really like is there's actually curriculum built around this. So if you do want to create a graded class, or you want to be doing more than just, show up, play video games, leave, High School Esports League created this curriculum. They have a free version, which is like their preview, and then you can buy more into it. But it goes into creating a portfolio, a digital portfolio, where kids are recording their gameplay, putting it on there, reflecting what they did well on, what they didn't do well on, showing their growth. Team communication, public speaking and advocacy. This was the big lesson that we covered. A lot of my kids are very nervous when they're talking, and they didn't really know how to say, well, I play esports, and this is why esports is cool. So having that public speaking and advocacy part, that's a good developmental growth for them. Just being able to say, this is why it's cool, this is why you should love it, this is what we're doing. Goal setting and decision making. And then there's also a health and wellness component. What I liked about this, so theirs covers mental and physical, but being Lutheran, we can add a spiritual component on there. And that spiritual component then jumps back into the mental and physical. And it was just good. We were able to start every week practice off. We would do a devotion, and then we would always start with a prayer before every game. And then we could just talk about why it's important to be healthy. Because it turns out when you're shoving Doritos and Mountain Dew and not moving for hours at a time, that your brain starts to get sluggish. And they would realize that. So, healthy eating is a big part of that, getting up and moving. So the league experience, we use Middle School Esports League. MSEL is a fantastic group. This is their second competition year that they've had this set up. They take care of all the matchmaking process. So you get your kids registered in the system, you have your team in the system, and then every time you go for your competition, they match you up with someone from around the US. So we played teams from Alaska, from Maine. We had a team in Florida. We had a homeschool team that we competed against that was actually just like 20 miles north of us, which I thought was cool. So it's this whole massive group of players, and they're not all Lutheran schools either, so you are playing public schools that way, but it does create a larger pool for you. Some games do have more participants than others. So we tried to set up a Mario Kart team, and it was us and another school from New York, and no one played it. We didn't have enough for a competition. Then we had Rocket League, where we had 500 schools all jump onto that, and 500 schools playing at the same time. So that was cool. But there's discrepancies in what's offered and who's doing what. And then your pricing is based off of the number of participants. So our Knockout City team went undefeated. They won the entire league for it, but we only had 16 teams we played against. So that's something to think about. Like, was it really we're the best in the nation, or just best out of these 16 teams? Whereas our Rocket League, we came in 300th place out of 500 different schools all across the nation. So because of that, Knockout City got a nice trophy and some medals, but the Rocket League team that won, they got a bunch of scholarships. Like each kid got a $5,000 scholarship, just because that's where all the money was getting poured into. And then their matchmaking, and you have your team, and then it puts the students together, and it allows them to converse through text, not through video, not through voice chat. It's only text, and they record everything, so there's a record if someone's trash talking or inappropriate stuff is being said. As a coach, it's nice knowing, well, you can go back and we can address that different. The other thing to know is everything is self-reported. So when your student team wins, they have to report it. But that means the other student team that lost can say they won. And then you're supposed to take photos and record matches and stuff like that. We had that happen on our Knockout City group. For our final game, the other team said they won. It was a complete accident. They recognized it. And because it was all recorded, we were able to get it fixed. But that is the problem of the self-reporting system. What I also like about middle school esports is you can run this on-site, having all your kids there. You can run it at home, or you can do a hybrid. So with COVID, we were having kids, as everyone else does, they come in and out of school, and you're like, what's happening? So the kids at home who are stuck at COVID quarantine, they could actually still join us after school to play in the competition matches. And then we would just Zoom them into the class so they'd be able to hear all the instructions, which was a nice feature to be able to do. It also prepares kids for the NEA, the National Esports Association, which is used for a lot of universities and high schools. And then, of course, it is a large cost per season at $475 per school. But your prize pools can make it worth it, especially the game you're playing. So some of the games that were available from this last competition fall semester and then last year spring, we had Rocket League, Super Smash Bros., chess, Knockout City, Mario Kart, Minecraft, Fortnite, and they just added Halo Infinite. So if you're not familiar with Rocket League, it's essentially soccer with super fast cars with rockets strapped to them, so you can do like these crazy jumps and aerials, flips. It's really cool. The kids get really into it. It's very fast-paced, and it does require a lot of training and skill. Some people have been playing this. We came up against people who had, one person had 3,000 hours logged playing Rocket League, at which point you're like, I can't beat you at this game. And then some have like just a few hours logged. So skill level is varying on that. What I like about this is it is completely free to play. So you can download it, play it, no issue, either on PC, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation. It's all available there. Super Smash Bros. Is your standard fighter. It's only available for Nintendo Switch, but every kid loves it. It's Mortal Kombat with Yoshi. It's the best way to describe it. They like it. There are pay-to-play characters which are overpowered, or OP, as I say, or as the kids say, right? So sometimes a new character is released and they have these really crazy technical abilities which can't compete with your standard stock characters. So that's something to keep in mind, and it does require you to to buy the game at $60. Chess, it's the free online version of chess. It's all skill-based. It's super easy to teach and train and have kids watch videos, or you can show them. You can have people come in who can help show them how to play this. It's also the fastest to teach and train kids on. A lot of them are already playing it too during the day. That's what I'm finding. Knockout City is a brand new game as of this fall. It was specifically developed by EA for esports competitions, which I think is pretty cool. It's just online dodgeball with a lot of cool abilities like this. It's easy to learn and pick up. None of my players played it. I had never played it before the season started, but it's very easy to strategize. Now the big problem, you have the free to play for like training up to level 20, but if you want to compete in private matches, you have to spend $20 on it. Or what happened to us was we spent $20 on it, but then a kid came in and joined late for us, really wanted to. He was a new student. So when we bought it for him, it was $5 because it was on sale. So it's just how it goes with those. Mario Kart, it's just a racing game. It's a $60 purchase. There's not very many participants, but it is always offered if they can get enough. Minecraft, this is the one students most likely have the most experience with. For competition, it is a 100-player battle royale PvP, so they're all dropped into the same server. They're given 5 minutes to collect as many resources as they can, and then they're in this kind of constrained area that they have to fight each other, and only one person can win. This does require a purchase now. You used to be able to get it for free, but that is what it is. This one, there's a way, I believe if you do it through Microsoft Education, you can get this one to run on Chromebooks for you. Fortnite, again, it's the standard competition shooter, 100-person battle royale. It's 100% free. Any of the stuff you pay for is just skins, so you're not having to worry about pay-to-play problems like that. But it is a shooter. And then Halo Infinite is the new one. It's a free. They have both a 4v4, so 4 players versus 4 players, or a battle royale for competition, where they put 20 players in, last one standing, and then you compete based off of that. It's a brand new game. It is also a shooter. Halo's been like the big competition game for the last, I'd say, probably 5 to 10 years. So there is experience if you're looking at getting into that. So my personal belief on streaming and engagement is I think it's a key to success for an esports team because it's getting kids interested. You're teaching them professionalism in streaming itself, but also what happens when you put stuff of kids online for the world to see. They're always going to want to try and give it their best and show their best on it. So you're playing that little bit psychological game with them to get them to perform a little better. But it's good. You're playing to one of like their key aspirations, especially as a middle schooler, is to become a professional streamer. One of the things too with streaming is you need to make sure you have the equipment to do it. So an Elgato capture card, if you're using Switch or consoles, it's a little tiny device that feeds an HDMI cable through it, and then it captures the data going through there and sends it to your PC, and then you can run that onto streaming software. You do need something higher end, though, for streaming with an Elgato capture card, just because I tried running it on a lower end PC once. It doesn't work well, it lags, it jitters, it shuts down. So a gaming laptop, which are fairly cheap now, or gaming PC is a good way to go. Some best practices for streaming, especially with middle school students, is never show their faces. I say that just because I'm from the mentality trying to work with kids and parents on what's allowed for social media. A lot of times parents don't want their kids being seen with this or have their photo face on any of our social media accounts. So it's easier not to put a live feed into the room. And also never run a live audio feed into your room to capture if you're streaming, just because it does get tense. You have kids who like to trash talk, and we want to be putting our best foot forward, and it's an easy way to manage that. It also encourages students, it helps encourage students with streaming who are not actively participating. So if they're on like your reserve roster, they're not playing that day, they can actually moderate your stream, moderate the interactions with people. And then if somebody's saying bad stuff in chat, they can boot them out, or they can engage with them. So it's a good learning aspect to it. And then scheduling streams ahead of time so you let your participants know or your viewers know when are you playing. And then just, again, some rules: no in-game taunting, remove inappropriate content, always have a channel moderator who's positive. That's a big thing. You don't want kids on your stream also taunting in chat. So some of my reflections, again, pushing for that school-owned device. I think it's key because you do manage the games, the subscriptions, the updates. It makes it easier in the long run for you. When you're setting this up, you don't have to worry about those kids for getting devices. Looking for sponsorships beyond just your school paying for everything. When I was setting up esports, I found Zaxby's, which is a chicken chain in Texas area. I don't know. They had a sign-up area for any team that wanted to, and the kids loved it because they sent us just a little loot crate that had pop sockets, hats, bags in it, and the kids got to say they were an officially sponsored esports team. So that was fun for them. And then enforce a hard limit, I say of 10 players or whatever you're comfortable with, but go definitely for those smaller groups, and if you're more than 10 players, get a second coach because it makes a world of difference. Because I really do feel like I let my Rocket League team down because I was focusing on my Knockout City League more, just because they were receptive. They wanted to learn more. My Rocket League team didn't. They just weren't playing well. So I naturally gravitated towards the group that wanted more active engagement from me. So if I had a second coach, I could have had someone always stationed with them, working with them. And then focusing on one game at a time. When you're, as a single coach, split between the two, during practice you're running between the two, and you're having to rapidly shift your thinking and strategizing between them and telling them what to do, what focusing on, so that task switching doesn't work. Doing just one game where you have 3 different teams, like Team A, Team B, Team C, makes it a lot easier for yourself. So that's all there is for that. Here's all of my contact information again. I'll jump back to that first slide if you wanted to scan that QR code. But I'd love to open this up for any questions or discussions you might have.
You said now is kind of like your off season?
Yes.
How often do you practice and what do you find your season to be and stuff like that?
So it's a really good question. I find myself, and this is something I've learned about myself, when I do something new, I kind of go full, diving into it, and then I overstretch myself and I burn out within a few years of doing it. So I'm actively trying to avoid that. So fall is our play season, and then spring is our off season. And the off season is mainly for me. Because it is an elective, I have 2 days a week where we are practicing together as a team, and then our competitions were only 1 day a week. So Knockout City was on Wednesdays, and Rocket League was on Thursdays after school. So practicing 2 days a week, and then competition 1 day a week. And that's all done through middle school esports for the competition itself. The other thing I think works with this is when you're taking that off season for kids, you're no longer having to compete. So we didn't have to compete with basketball players in basketball practice, making sure kids can make it. We weren't competing with baseball. We don't have a lot of, because esports is very male dominated still, and a lot of our students that showed interest were males. They weren't participating in soccer, so this was a good way to include them in. And then also that opens up, if you're doing a non-Lego robotics team, you can turn your spring into your robotics after school club that way. But it helps the kids reset, otherwise you're overloading the kids too. Yep. But it's also...
What's the minimum number of kids? What if you had a small group? What would be the minimum number that you really could do in a gym?
3 players.
3 players? Okay.
So Knockout City was 3 players. Rocket League requires a minimum of 3 players. There are some games where it's just single player, like Minecraft, for instance. And kids can do multiple games through the middle school esports group, which is nice. So then they can be playing Minecraft and Rocket League, Knockout City if they really wanted to all at once. I suggest having 5 players on a team. That creates 2 reserve players that you can rotate out either during competition play as needed, or if someone's sick, you have a backup player. like you would. But yeah, I'd say 3 to 5 is minimum. Bare minimum 3 for sure. Just tell them not to get sick. Don't go home on quarantine. Yeah. I will say it's really fun watching the kids get into this too. They love doing this, and they talk it up to their friends. And we've had some kids that I wouldn't necessarily think. I would think maybe they'd be more inclined to like make fun of this. They're just super excited. Like they'll come in before practice when there's a lull in their practice time after school. They'll come in and watch us. We had a lot of students engaging on our stream, watching us, cheering us on that way. And then streaming was a great way. We weren't allowing parents in because of COVID to view competitions, so it was a good way to engage with the parents that way too. But they take pride in it, which is, sometimes rare nowadays to see. Kids taking pride, like really taking pride in something they're doing. It was fun. Otherwise, yeah, that's all I have for this.
How many years have you guys been doing it?
So technically 1 full year, but with COVID, it feels like 50 years to say that much. Yeah, so we launched it spring of 2021. That was kind of our test trial phase for it. And then, August was when we really launched into the competition play. So, yeah.
And if your kids, you said you had a couple of competitions where they won some financial.
Not for ours. So our Knockout City team, they did take first, so they got a trophy. They got like really, they're hefty, nice medals. They got some like of the middle school esports swag they have. Just kind of little stuff like that. If, however, our Rocket League team did really well, we're talking about like each kid on the team would have received a $5,000 scholarship for the college of their choosing when they're ready to go. And when you're thinking about that opportunity in middle school, like you have a 7th grader who already has $5,000 set for college, just put away now. That's a huge opportunity. And then same in high school, like you have kids who are competing for like $16,000, $20,000 in scholarships for each competition. And that's
So
huge.
it's always usually a scholarship type of situation.
Mhm.
It's not.
No. In the past, when middle school esports set up their first round, they weren't able to get enough money for scholarships for it. So what they did was they purchased Xbox One X console, a PlayStation 5, and a Nintendo Switch. And then the winners of those competitions could choose the one console for their school to use. Yeah. There's always a lot of stuff. And other teams I've really wanted, Rob Jacklin from St. John Ellisville. We've talked about trying to get kids together to do esports competitions, try setting up like a little Lutheran league around us. But it's just tough with everything else going on to get that done right now. But I think we're going to keep pushing for it. I'd love to see a national Lutheran esports league, just because we have the ability to do it. It's all online based, so why not? And you can take very much the same template of the middle school esports league for it. So I think that is something that can be potentially set up. And if college Concordia wants to set that up, I think that would be a great way for them to get some kids coming in.